They hired me for what seemed like a routine corporate audit. 3 days later, what I discovered in their building had me running for my life. But let me start at the beginning, when I was still Margaret Chen, desperate job seeker, walking into the glass towers of Meridian Technologies for what I thought was just another interview. At 58, after being laid off from Henderson & Associates following their restructuring, I'd been unemployed for 8 months. My savings were nearly gone, and age discrimination was real. No one wanted to hire a traditional accountant when they could get someone half my age who understood cryptocurrency and blockchain. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly manicured nails, barely looked up from her screen. "Margaret Chen, please take a seat. Mr. Blackstone will see you shortly." David Blackstone's corner office screamed success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, awards lined the walls, and a photo showed him shaking hands with the mayor at some charity event. He was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with the kind of confident smile that comes from never having to worry about money. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming in." He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk. "I have to admit, your resume is refreshingly straightforward. No fancy MBA, no claims about revolutionizing modern accounting. Just solid, traditional experience." I kept my voice humble, grateful. "I've been doing corporate accounting for 30 years, Mr. Blackstone. I may not know all the latest software, but I understand numbers, and I'm very detail-oriented." "That's exactly what we need." He leaned back in his leather chair. "We've had issues with previous auditors who got distracted by unnecessary complications. We need someone who can focus on the basics. Make sure our books are clean for the board review next month." The salary he offered was below market rate, but I couldn't afford to negotiate. "That sounds very reasonable," I said, trying not to sound too eager. "Excellent." Blackstone pressed a button on his desk. "Sarah, could you come in? I'd like you to meet our new auditor." Sarah Martinez entered with a warm smile and a firm handshake. As CFO, she'd be working closely with me. "Margaret, we're so glad to have someone with your experience. These young auditors today, they always want to reinvent everything. Sometimes you just need someone who understands that not every number tells a dramatic story." What they didn't know was that I'd caught the subtle exchange of looks between them when I mentioned being detail-oriented. The slight pause before Blackstone agreed to hire me. The way Sarah emphasized traditional experience with just a hint of condescension. They thought they were getting exactly what they wanted. An aging, desperate auditor who would rubber stamp their books without asking difficult questions. Someone whose basic skills wouldn't detect whatever sophisticated schemes they were running. Someone who would provide them with professional cover while being too intimidated or grateful to cause problems. As I signed the employment paperwork, Tom Bradley, the head of security, introduced himself. Ex-military, by his bearing. His handshake lingered just a moment too long, and his eyes were colder than his smile. "Welcome to the team, Miss Chen. I'm sure you'll find working here educational." "I start Monday?" I asked, gathering my paperwork. "Monday morning, 8 sharp," Sarah confirmed. "I'll give you the grand tour, introduce you to the team. We keep a tight ship here, very organized. I think you'll appreciate our systematic approach." Walking back to the parking garage, I allowed myself a small smile. They had no idea who they'd just hired. The desperate older woman act had worked perfectly. They'd researched my recent employment history, seen the layoffs and job searching, and decided I was their ideal useful fool. But they hadn't dug deep enough. If they had, they would have discovered that before my traditional corporate accounting career, I'd spent 25 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. They would have learned that I specialized in investigating sophisticated money laundering operations, often involving legitimate businesses used as fronts for international criminal networks. Most importantly, they would have realized that my retirement to quiet corporate work 5 years ago wasn't really retirement at all. I was consulting for the Bureau on cases that required someone who could blend into corporate environments without raising suspicion. Margaret Chen, desperate job seeker, was about to give Meridian Technologies exactly the audit they deserved. But it wouldn't be the one they were expecting. The elevator to the parking level felt like a countdown. In 72 hours, I would begin the most important audit of my career. And David Blackstone, Sarah Martinez, and Tom Bradley had just made the biggest mistake of their criminal lives. They thought they'd hired a harmless grandmother to cover their tracks. What they'd actually done was invite a federal crime specialist into the heart of their operation. This was going to be interesting. My first week at Meridian Technologies was exactly what you'd expect from a sophisticated operation trying to appear legitimate. Sarah Martinez gave me the complete tour: gleaming offices, state-of-the-art conference rooms, and a break room stocked with organic coffee and artisanal snacks. Everything designed to impress visitors and reassure employees that they worked for a successful, ethical company. "Here's your workspace," Sarah said, leading me to a cubicle near the accounting department. "Nothing fancy, but you'll have access to all our financial systems. Tom Bradley set up your security clearances yesterday." The mention of security clearances for a simple audit should have been my first red flag, but I maintained my grateful older woman persona. "This is wonderful, thank you. Much nicer than my last office." What struck me immediately was the employee behavior. In legitimate companies, people are curious about new hires, especially auditors. They ask questions, make small talk, maybe complain about their workload. Here, employees barely acknowledged my presence. They were polite but distant, like they'd been coached on how to interact with me. The financial records Sarah provided looked clean at first glance. Revenue streams from their technology consulting business, standard corporate expenses, nothing that would raise red flags for a traditional auditor. But 25 years with the FBI had taught me to look beyond surface presentations. "The expense reports from the third quarter need review," Sarah explained, pulling up files on my computer. "Some of our consultants travel internationally for client projects. The documentation might seem extensive, but we're very thorough about compliance." Extensive was an understatement. These weren't normal business travel expenses. The amounts were too large, the destinations too specific, and the patterns too regular. Weekly flights to the same 3 cities in Eastern Europe, always on company jets, always with the same consultants whose names appeared nowhere else in the employee database. But what made my trained eye narrow were the corresponding cash withdrawals. Large amounts, always within 24 hours of these international trips, always from accounts that were technically legitimate, but structured in ways that screamed money laundering to anyone who knew what to look for. "Miss Chen?" James Wright, the legal counsel, appeared at my cubicle. "How's the review going? Finding everything in order?" His timing felt rehearsed, like he'd been watching me examine those specific files. "Oh, yes, very organized. I was just trying to understand the international consulting work. Fascinating business model. Yes, we're very proud of our global reach." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course, many of our client relationships involve confidentiality agreements. We can't always be specific about project details." Translation: don't ask too many questions about where the money really goes. That afternoon, I requested access to the subsidiary company records. Sarah's response was telling. "Oh, those are handled by an external firm. Very specialized international tax structures. I'm sure Tom Bradley mentioned that certain files require additional clearance." Tom Bradley appeared within minutes of that conversation, as if he'd been listening. "Miss Chen, I understand you're interested in our subsidiary operations. That's thorough of you." "Just being complete in my review," I said, keeping my voice apologetic. "I don't want to miss anything important." "Of course, but some of our international entities involve proprietary client information. We'll need to arrange special access for those files. Maybe next week?" Next week never came. Every time I requested specific documents, there was another layer of approval needed, another security protocol to follow, another reason why I couldn't see certain records immediately. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They thought I was just a curious older woman who could be managed with bureaucratic delays. What they didn't realize was that I was documenting every excuse, every evasion, every suspicious pattern in ways that would hold up in federal court. The real breakthrough came on Thursday afternoon. I was working late, or pretending to, when I heard voices from the conference room. The soundproofing was good, but not perfect, and Sarah Martinez was angry about something. Told you she was asking too many questions. Maybe we should have gone with the younger candidate. Relax. That was Blackstone's voice. She's exactly what we need. Curious enough to seem competent, but not sophisticated enough to understand what she's looking at. The board review is in 2 weeks. After that, we can restructure her access if necessary. And if she keeps pushing for the subsidiary records? Tom's handling that. A few more delays, maybe a minor security concern about her background check. Nothing dramatic. We just need her to sign off on the main book so we have audit compliance on record. My blood turned to ice. They weren't just using me as cover. They'd researched my background specifically to find someone they thought they could manipulate. Someone whose basic skills would miss their sophisticated fraud, but whose professional credentials would give them legal protection. The irony was breathtaking. They'd hired me because they thought I was too limited to catch them. What they'd actually done was invite a federal financial crimes specialist into their operation and give me legitimate access to their records. Friday morning brought the most revealing discovery. While reviewing payroll records, I found payments to consultants who didn't exist in any other company database. But the bank routing numbers for these ghost employees led to accounts in countries I recognized from trafficking investigations. The same financial patterns I'd seen in cases involving forced labor and human smuggling. This wasn't just corporate fraud. Meridian Technologies was a front for something much darker. When Sarah stopped by my desk that afternoon, I was ready with my performance. "Everything looks good so far," I said, smiling gratefully. "Just a few minor questions about expense documentation, but nothing unusual for a company this size." "Excellent." Her relief was obvious. "I knew you were the right choice for this project. No unnecessary complications." As I packed up my things that evening, Tom Bradley appeared near the elevator. "Working late, Miss Chen?" "Very dedicated." "Just want to do a thorough job," I replied. "Though I have to ask, is it normal for the building to have so many security cameras? I noticed them in areas where most companies don't bother with surveillance." His expression shifted slightly. "Corporate security is taken very seriously here. We've had incidents in the past. Better safe than sorry." The elevator doors closed between us, but I caught his reflection in the polished metal. He was already pulling out his phone, probably reporting my question to someone higher up the chain. That weekend, I made a decision that would change everything. It was time to activate protocols I'd hoped never to use in a corporate setting. On Monday morning, Margaret Chen, the grateful auditor, would continue her work. But she would no longer be working alone. 25 years of federal training had taught me that when you find evidence of international money laundering connected to human trafficking patterns, you don't wait for more proof. You start building a case that will destroy the entire network. Monday morning brought what appeared to be a breakthrough. I'd prepared a preliminary audit report over the weekend, carefully documenting the financial irregularities I'd discovered while maintaining my persona as a competent but not overly sophisticated auditor. "Sarah, I found some discrepancies that need addressing," I announced during our morning meeting, sliding a folder across her desk. "Nothing major, but the expense documentation for international consulting needs some cleanup before I can complete the audit." Sarah's reaction was perfectly calibrated, just the right amount of concern mixed with professional appreciation. "Thank you for being so thorough, Margaret. What exactly are we looking at?" Several expense reports lack proper supporting documentation. Some international wire transfers don't have corresponding invoices, and there are some subsidiary transactions that aren't clearly categorized. I kept my voice neutral, professional. "Standard issues, really. but they need to be resolved for compliance. Of course. She made notes as I spoke. I'll have James gather the missing documentation immediately. How long do you need to review the additional materials? A few days should be sufficient. I paused, letting her think she was managing the situation. I appreciate how cooperative everyone's been. Some companies get defensive during audits, but you've all been wonderful. The relief on her face was unmistakable. They thought they'd successfully contained the problem. A few missing forms, some paperwork cleanup, and their harmless auditor would sign off on their books without understanding the real nature of their business. That afternoon, James Wright appeared with banker's boxes full of documentation. Everything you requested, Miss Chen. I had our international division expedite the file gathering. The documents were impressive: professionally forged invoices, manufactured client contracts, and elaborate paper trails that would satisfy any traditional auditor. Someone had spent serious money creating this fiction. But when you'd spent decades investigating financial crimes, certain patterns became impossible to miss. The fake invoices used slightly incorrect formatting for European tax documents. The client contracts referenced business licenses that didn't exist, and the banking documentation, while sophisticated, showed timestamp irregularities that indicated recent creation rather than historical record-keeping. But I played my part perfectly. This is exactly what I needed. Very professional organization of records. We pride ourselves on attention to detail, James replied. Will this resolve the compliance issues? Absolutely. I should be able to complete the audit by Friday. By Wednesday, I had what appeared to be a complete picture of legitimate business operations. The expense irregularities had been explained through additional documentation. The international consulting work was supported by client contracts and project deliverables. The subsidiary transactions were clarified through corporate structure charts and legal agreements. Anyone conducting a standard corporate audit would have been satisfied. The books balanced, the documentation existed, and the business model, while complex, appeared legal and profitable. Thursday morning, I presented my preliminary findings to the executive team. David Blackstone, Sarah Martinez, James Wright, and Tom Bradley gathered in the conference room, all wearing expressions of professional interest mixed with barely concealed anxiety. The audit is substantially complete, I began, consulting my official-looking reports. I've identified and resolved several documentation issues, but overall, Meridian Technologies maintains excellent financial controls. The collective exhale was almost audible. They'd done it. They'd successfully fooled their auditor and would soon have official compliance certification for their criminal enterprise. There are a few minor recommendations, I continued. Better expense report standardization, clearer subsidiary accounting procedures, that sort of thing. But nothing that prevents me from providing full audit approval. Blackstone leaned forward. So you'll be able to sign off on our financial statements for the board review? Without reservation, I confirmed. You should be very proud of the financial management here. It's quite sophisticated. The meeting ended with handshakes, grateful smiles, and discussions about timing for the final report. They were so pleased with themselves that they didn't notice Tom Bradley's slight frown when I mentioned conducting a final facility walkthrough the next day. Just standard procedure, I explained. I like to see the physical operations that generate the revenue I'm auditing. Helps me understand the business model completely. Of course, Sarah agreed quickly. Tom can arrange a comprehensive tour tomorrow morning. That evening, I sat in my hotel room reviewing everything I'd documented. In 3 days, I'd gathered enough evidence to prove systematic financial fraud, money laundering, and probable connections to international criminal networks. But I needed more than financial evidence. I needed to confirm what those basement-level security cameras and restricted access areas were actually hiding. The facility tour was scheduled for 9 a.m. Friday. It would be my last day as Margaret Chen, grateful auditor, because what I planned to discover during that walkthrough would change everything. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hope your audit went well, Aunt Maggie. Uncle always said you were good with numbers. Danny, my nephew, my sister's boy, who I hadn't heard from in 2 years. The timing of his message, right after my successful audit presentation, sent ice through my veins. Danny, who had gambling problems. Danny, who owed money to dangerous people. Danny, who knew about my background with the FBI. I stared at the message, understanding flooding through me like cold water. They hadn't chosen me randomly. Someone had told them exactly who I was, what my background included, and how to manipulate me into this position. Someone in my own family had sold me to these criminals. The perfect audit I'd just presented wasn't the end of their plan. It was the beginning. They needed me to sign off on their books, but they also needed to ensure I could never testify about what I'd discovered. Tomorrow's facility tour wasn't going to be a walkthrough. It was going to be my elimination, carefully planned and professionally executed. But they'd made one critical error. They thought Margaret Chen was just a corporate auditor who'd stumbled into their web through family betrayal. What they didn't realize was that FBI agents don't stumble into anything. We infiltrate, we investigate, and when we're betrayed, we adapt. The facility tour would happen as scheduled, but I wouldn't be going in as their victim. I'd be going in as a federal agent conducting a criminal investigation. And Danny's text had just provided me with the last piece of evidence I needed to understand their entire operation. What's the hardest lesson you had to learn about trusting the wrong people? Share your wisdom below. Real, recognize real, and your experience might save someone else the pain. Friday morning arrived with the kind of artificial cheerfulness that precedes disaster. Tom Bradley met me in the lobby at exactly 9 a.m., wearing his professional security smile and carrying a tablet loaded with what I assumed would be my final documentation. Ready for the grand tour, Miss Chen? I think you'll find our facilities quite impressive. The first part of the walkthrough was standard corporate theater. Bradley showed me the main production floor where legitimate technology consulting work actually happened. Real employees doing real work, generating enough actual revenue to provide cover for whatever else Meridian Technologies was really doing. We're particularly proud of our client services division, Bradley explained, gesturing to a floor of cubicles where young professionals worked on genuine-looking projects. The international consulting work you've been auditing supports some very important clients. But it was what he didn't show me that confirmed my suspicions. As we moved through the building, I noted every restricted area, every door marked authorized personnel only, every security camera positioned in places that suggested monitoring more than protection. "What's down there?" I asked innocently, pointing to a stairwell marked Building Services, Restricted Access. "Maintenance, storage, boring infrastructure stuff," Bradley replied without hesitation. "Nothing that would interest an auditor." The ease of his lie told me everything. In 25 years with the FBI, I'd learned that when someone dismisses an area too quickly, it's exactly where you need to look. We were heading back toward the executive floor when I made my move. "Oh, I think I left my reading glasses in the accounting department. Could we make a quick stop?" "Of course." Bradley checked his watch. "I'll wait here while you grab them." But instead of going to accounting, I took a detour. The restricted stairwell was 2 corridors away, and security cameras had blind spots if you knew how to use them. The FBI had taught me how to move through buildings without being tracked, how to test doors without triggering alarms, how to gather intelligence in hostile environments. The basement level was nothing like the polished corporate floors above. The lighting was harsh fluorescent, the walls were unpainted concrete, and the air had that stale, recycled quality that suggested poor ventilation and heavy use by people who didn't want to be there. But it was the sound that made my blood run cold. Voices speaking in what sounded like Eastern European languages. Not the casual conversation of employees, but the desperate, frightened tones of people under duress. I followed the sound down a corridor lined with doors that had electronic locks and small windows set too high for normal viewing. These weren't storage rooms or maintenance areas. They were holding cells. Through one of the windows, I saw them. Young women, maybe a dozen, sitting on cots in a room that was clean but clearly designed for containment. They looked tired, scared, and trapped. Human trafficking. Not just money laundering or corporate fraud, but actual people being held against their will in the basement of a supposedly legitimate business. My FBI training kicked in automatically. Document everything. Gather evidence. Identify escape routes. Count potential victims. Assess security measures. Plan extraction protocols. But first, I had to get out of there before Bradley realized I wasn't coming back. I made it to the accounting department just as my phone buzzed with what I recognized as a security alert. Someone was looking for me. "Sorry," I told Bradley when he appeared moments later. "Couldn't find my glasses anywhere. Must have left them at home." His smile was professional, but his eyes were calculating. "No problem. Shall we finish the tour?" The rest of the walkthrough felt like performance art. Bradley showed me conference rooms and executive offices while I nodded appreciatively and made small talk about the company's impressive facilities. But every minute, I was thinking about those women in the basement, about the systematic operation that used corporate legitimacy to hide international human trafficking. When we returned to Blackstone's office for the final audit presentation, I had to summon every ounce of professional training to maintain my cover. Sarah Martinez and James Wright joined us, all wearing expressions of cautious optimism. "The facility tour was very enlightening," I began, opening my final audit report. "Meridian Technologies operates a sophisticated, well-organized business with impressive security measures." Sophisticated was definitely the word for it. They'd created a perfect front operation, legitimate business activities generating real revenue to mask criminal operations that generated exponentially more profit through human trafficking. "I'm prepared to sign off on your financial statements without qualification," I continued. "The international consulting revenue streams are properly documented, and your corporate structure demonstrates excellent compartmentalization." The relief in the room was palpable. They'd done it. They'd successfully used their harmless auditor to provide professional cover for a criminal enterprise that generated millions through the systematic abuse of human beings. "Excellent work, Miss Chen," Blackstone said, standing to shake my hand. "I knew you were exactly what this company needed." As I packed up my materials, Tom Bradley approached with an envelope. "Your final payment, plus a bonus for exceptional work. We hope you'll consider us for future audit needs." The money felt heavy in my hands, like 30 pieces of silver. They were paying me to legitimize their trafficking operation, and they expected me to be grateful for the opportunity. "There is one small matter," James Wright interjected. "Given the sensitive nature of some client relationships, we'll need you to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, standard practice for our international consulting work." The NDA was anything but standard. It included clauses about criminal penalties for revealing any information about company operations, clients, or personnel. Violation would result in immediate legal action and potential criminal prosecution for corporate espionage. They weren't just buying my silence, they were creating legal weapons to destroy me if I ever tried to expose what I'd discovered. I signed the document without reading it carefully, maintaining my grateful older woman persona. Of course, I understand completely. But as I walked to my car, my phone buzzed again with another message from Danny. "Hope everything went well today. Maybe we can catch up soon. I owe you dinner for helping me out with those people I mentioned." Those people. Not my friends or some business contacts. Those people. The phrasing of someone who was afraid of the individuals he'd betrayed his own family to help. In that moment, I understood the complete scope of their operation. Danny hadn't just provided them with information about my background. He'd made himself complicit in whatever they were planning to do to me. His gambling debts weren't just financial leverage. They were tools to turn family members into willing accomplices in murder. That evening, in the privacy of my hotel room, I made the call I'd been dreading since I first discovered those holding cells. "This is Agent Margaret Chen, badge number 47792. I need to speak with Agent Harrison in human trafficking immediately. I'm requesting emergency federal intervention for an active trafficking operation with multiple victims in immediate danger." The response was swift and professional. "Agent Chen, your status shows retired consultant. What's your current location and situation?" "I'm embedded in a corporate audit cover at Meridian Technologies, downtown financial district. They're using legitimate business operations to front an international trafficking network. I have visual confirmation of approximately 12 victims in basement holding facilities." There was a pause. "Agent Chen, you're not authorized for solo operations. Why wasn't the Bureau notified before you initiated contact with this organization?" The question hit me like ice water. In my focus on maintaining cover as a corporate auditor, I'd made a crucial error. I'd been investigating as Margaret Chen, private citizen, not as FBI Agent Chen conducting official business. Everything I'd discovered, every piece of evidence I'd gathered, every moment of access I'd gained, it was all potentially inadmissible because I wasn't operating under federal authority. But those women in the basement didn't care about legal technicalities. They needed immediate rescue, and I was the only person who knew where they were and how to access the facility. "Agent Harrison, I need emergency backup for victim extraction. I can provide building layouts, security protocols, and timing for optimal intervention. But it has to be tonight, before they realize their audit cover has been compromised." "Negative, Agent Chen. You need to extract immediately and report for debriefing. We'll initiate a formal investigation through proper channels. By the time you get warrants and organize a task force, they'll have moved those victims or worse. I'm telling you, there are 12 women being held against their will right now, and I have the access and knowledge to save them." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. The Bureau was going to prioritize legal procedures over immediate rescue operations. They would spend weeks building a case while those women remained in captivity. I hung up the phone and stared at the ceiling of my generic hotel room. In 6 hours, when Meridian Technologies opened for business on Monday morning, they would discover that their harmless auditor had accessed restricted areas during the facility tour. Tom Bradley's security systems would show my unauthorized basement visit, and they would realize their cover was blown. Those women had maybe 8 hours before they were relocated, eliminated, or disappeared into an international trafficking network that could move them anywhere in the world. 8 hours to plan and execute a rescue operation that the FBI wouldn't authorize and that I couldn't accomplish alone. But I wasn't alone. I had 25 years of federal training, a nephew whose gambling debts made him controllable, and a corporate infiltration that had given me complete access to their security systems and operational procedures. Margaret Chen, corporate auditor, was done. But FBI Agent Chen was just getting started. And David Blackstone, Sarah Martinez, Tom Bradley, and James Wright were about to learn what happens when you mistake a federal agent for a useful fool. The transformation began at 3:17 a.m. in a hotel room that suddenly felt like a tactical operations center. I spread building schematics across the bed, cross-referenced security camera positions with my memory of the facility layout, and activated protocols I'd hoped never to use outside official federal operations. My hands moved with muscle memory developed over 25 years of financial crimes investigations. From my travel bag, I retrieved equipment that Margaret Chen, grateful auditor, would never carry. A digital evidence recorder, secure communication devices, lock manipulation tools, and credentials that would gain me access to federal databases. The woman who had spent a week playing a desperate job seeker was gone. In her place was FBI agent Margaret Chen, and she had 8 hours to save 12 lives. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was facing. The building schematic showed 3 basement levels, but my Friday tour had only accessed the first. If Meridian Technologies was running a sophisticated trafficking operation, they would have multiple layers of security, backup holding areas, and contingency plans for moving victims quickly. I opened my secure laptop and accessed the National Crime Information Center database. What I found confirmed my worst suspicions. Meridian Technologies had connections to at least 6 other consulting companies in major cities, all sharing the same financial patterns I'd identified. This wasn't just a local operation, it was a node in an international network, but databases could wait. Those women needed immediate rescue, and I had to move before Monday morning revealed my basement infiltration to Tom Bradley's security systems. At 4:45 a.m., I made a call that would either save lives or destroy my career. "Danny, it's Aunt Maggie. I know it's early, but I need to see you right now." My nephew's voice was thick with sleep and anxiety. "Aunt Maggie? Is everything okay? I thought you were doing some corporate job." "Meet me at Denny's on 5th Street, 15 minutes. And Danny, bring whatever you use to contact the people you owe money to." The silence on the other end confirmed everything. Danny wasn't just a gambling addict who'd sold family information. He was an active communication link to the criminal network that owned him. Denny's at 5 a.m. was perfect for what I needed. Public enough to be safe, empty enough for privacy, and familiar enough that Danny wouldn't suspect he was walking into a federal operation. He arrived looking exactly like what he was. A desperate man who'd made terrible choices and was living with the consequences. Thin, nervous, wearing clothes that had seen better days. But when he saw me, his expression shifted to something that might have been hope. "Aunt Maggie, I'm so glad you called. I've been wanting to talk to you about—" He stopped mid-sentence, studying my face. "You look different. More focused. Danny, I need you to listen very carefully. The people you gave information about me, they're not loan sharks. They're human traffickers. And right now, there are 12 women locked in the basement of the company I've been auditing." His face went white. "What? No, They just wanted to know about your background, your work history. They said it was for employment verification." Employment verification doesn't require details about 25 years with the FBI Financial Crimes Division. The words hit him like a physical blow. Danny stared at me as understanding dawned, not just about what he'd helped facilitate, but about who his Aunt Maggie really was. Your FBI?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Was FBI. Now I'm a consultant who just spent a week documenting a human trafficking operation, and in about 4 hours, they're going to realize their harmless auditor accessed areas she shouldn't have seen." Danny's hands trembled as he reached for his coffee. "Aunt Maggie, They said it was just background research for hiring. They never mentioned anything about kidnapping women and holding them in basement cells?" I kept my voice level, professional. "Danny, I need you to understand something. Those people you owe money to, they're going to kill me to protect their operation, and after they kill me, they're going to kill you because you're a witness to their recruitment methods." The reality of his situation hit him like ice water. "Oh God, what have I done?" "You've made a mistake that we're going to fix together." I leaned forward, switching to the voice I'd used in thousands of FBI interrogations. "But I need complete honesty, and I need it now. How do you communicate with them?" With shaking hands, Danny pulled out a burner phone. "They gave me this, said to only use it for emergencies." "Perfect. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to text them that I called you, worried about something I saw during my audit. You're going to tell them I'm asking questions about building security and whether I should report some irregularities I noticed. But that will make them panic and move those women tonight instead of tomorrow, which means I'll know exactly when and how they're planning to transport the victims." Danny stared at me with growing understanding. "You're going to intercept them." "Danny, for the past week I've been Margaret Chen, desperate auditor. But Margaret Chen was always a cover identity. I've spent 25 years investigating financial crimes, and the last 5 years I've specialized in trafficking operations that use corporate fronts. I opened my laptop and showed him surveillance footage I'd captured during my basement infiltration. These women are going to die if we don't act tonight. But I can't save them alone, and the FBI won't authorize immediate intervention. What do you need me to do? The transformation in Danny's voice told me everything. The scared, guilty nephew was gone. In his place was a man who understood he had one chance to redeem himself for betraying his family. I need you to be my inside communication link. When they respond to your text, I need real-time intelligence on their movement plans. And Danny, if they ask you to do anything that puts those women at greater risk, you refuse, no matter what they threaten. He nodded, already composing the message that would trigger the endgame. As he typed, I activated the secure communication protocols I'd hoped never to use outside official operations. Agent Harrison, this is Chen. I know you told me to extract, but I have a credible inside source and intelligence on immediate victim movement. I need backup units positioned for emergency intervention. The response was swift and angry. Agent Chen, you are operating without authorization. Any evidence you gather will be inadmissible, and any action you take is not sanctioned by the Bureau. Copy that. I'm documenting for the record that the FBI is prioritizing legal procedures over immediate victim rescue. Out. I closed the secure channel and looked at Danny. In about 30 minutes, Tom Bradley is going to call you asking for more details about my concerns. When he does, you're going to tell him exactly what I tell you to say. At 6:23 a.m., Danny's burner phone rang. Danny, this is Tom. We understand your aunt has some questions about her audit work. I gestured for Danny to put it on speaker. Tom Bradley's voice was calm, professional, but I could hear the tension underneath. They knew something was wrong. Yeah, she called me worried about some security stuff she noticed, Danny said, reading from notes I'd prepared. Something about basement access and whether she should report unusual activity to, I think she said some federal database. The silence on the other end was telling. Bradley was calculating exactly how much I might have seen and what it meant for their operation. Did she mention any specific concerns? Something about restricted areas and, what did she call them? Holding facilities? She wasn't making much sense, honestly, but she seemed pretty worked up about it. Where is she now? Hotel, I think. Said she was going to make some calls this morning to figure out what to do. Another pause. Danny, we're going to need you to do us another favor. Can you meet with your aunt this morning and find out exactly what she saw and who she plans to contact? This was it. The moment that would confirm whether Danny was ready to risk everything to save those women or whether his debt and fear would make him complicit in their murder. Sure, Danny said, his voice steady. What do you want me to tell her? Just keep her calm and find out what she knows. We'll handle the rest. After Bradley hung up, Danny and I sat in silence for a moment. Then he looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to visit our family barbecues. Aunt Maggie, I know I screwed up, but I want to help fix this. Then here's what we're going to do. You're going to go home and wait for their next contact. When they tell you how they want to handle me, you're going to agree to help them. But you're going to be wearing a wire, and everything they say is going to be recorded as evidence. I handed him a device no bigger than a shirt button. FBI standard surveillance equipment, federal court admissible. And Danny, when this is over, you're going into witness protection until we can dismantle their entire network. At 7:45 a.m., as the sun rose over a city that had no idea 12 women were fighting for their lives in a basement, I initiated the final phase of an operation that would either expose an international trafficking network or get me killed trying. Agent Margaret Chen was about to remind some very sophisticated criminals why the FBI Financial Crimes Division has a 94% conviction rate. The woman they'd hired to provide audit cover was about to destroy their entire operation. At 8:30 p.m., everything converged in the parking garage beneath Meridian Technologies. I sat in a rented surveillance van, monitoring 3 different communication channels, while watching Danny approach the building where Tom Bradley waited with what he thought would be the solution to their audit problem. 24 hours ago, I'd been Margaret Chen, grateful corporate auditor. Now I was coordinating a federal operation that would either save 12 lives or end mine. Testing audio, Danny whispered, touching the surveillance device hidden in his jacket collar. Clear reception, I confirmed. Remember, let them explain the plan completely before you agree to anything. I need their entire conspiracy on record. Through my telephoto lens, I watched Danny enter the building. My backup monitoring equipment showed his location as he moved through the lobby, onto the elevator, down to the basement level where everything had started. The audio feed crackled to life. Danny, thanks for coming on short notice? Tom Bradley's voice, calm and professional as always. No problem. What's the situation with my aunt? She saw things during her facility tour that could complicate our business operations. We need her to understand that discretion is essential for everyone's safety. I'd heard this language before in trafficking investigations. Discretion meant silence. Everyone's safety meant threats against family members. Complicate business operations meant murder. What kind of things did she see? Danny asked, following my coaching. Areas of the building that aren't part of normal corporate operations. We have some international clients who require specialized services. Your aunt might have misinterpreted what she observed. Specialized services. The euphemism made my skin crawl, but it was exactly the kind of language that would convict them in federal court. So, what do you need me to do? We need you to arrange a private meeting with Margaret, somewhere isolated where we can have an honest conversation about her concerns without any misunderstandings. This was it, the moment they officially solicited Danny to help them commit murder. You want me to set up my aunt so you can kill her, Danny said, his voice steady despite what this admission meant. The silence on the audio feed stretched for long seconds. Then Bradley's laugh, cold and calculating. Danny, you watch too many movies. We just need to ensure she understands the importance of client confidentiality. Sometimes that requires convincing arguments. And if she doesn't understand, then she'll have an accident, something believable. Older woman, isolated location, medical emergency. Very sad, but these things happen. I pressed record on my secure evidence device. In less than 2 minutes, Tom Bradley had confessed to conspiracy to commit murder, detailed their plan for covering it up, and implicated himself in the broader trafficking operation. But Danny wasn't finished. Following our rehearsed strategy, he pushed for more details. What about the business operations she saw? The stuff in the basement? That's being relocated tonight. Our international clients understand that sometimes facilities need to change locations quickly. By tomorrow morning, there won't be any evidence of specialized services at this location. They were moving the victims. Right now, while we talked, those 12 women were being transported to another facility where I'd never find them. Where are they moving to? Danny asked. Better that you don't know specifics, but our clients will be safely relocated to our secondary facility across town. Your aunt's concerns about building security will be irrelevant by morning. I activated my emergency communication channel. This is Agent Chen to any federal units monitoring this frequency. I have recorded confessions of conspiracy to commit murder and confirmation of human trafficking victim relocation in progress. Request immediate intercept assistance. The response was swift. Agent Chen, this is Agent Harrison. We have teams positioned at Meridian Technologies and the secondary facility at the Port District Warehouse Complex. Stand by for coordinated intervention. My heart hammered. The FBI had been monitoring the entire operation, waiting for exactly this moment when they had enough evidence to act decisively. Danny, start moving toward the exit, I whispered. Tell them you need to think about the timeline for setting up the meeting. Through the audio feed. I'll need to figure out how to get my aunt to meet somewhere private without making her suspicious. Maybe give me until Wednesday to set something up. Wednesday works. But Danny, if she contacts any federal authorities before then, your gambling debts become the least of your problems. I understand. At 8:47 p.m., federal agents simultaneously breached Meridian Technologies in the Port District warehouse. Through my surveillance equipment, I watched tactical teams flood the building where Danny was extracting from his meeting with Bradley. Emergency communication channels filled with status reports. Building secure, suspect in custody. Basement level clear, evidence of recent prisoner holding confirmed. Port District facility breached, 12 victims recovered alive. 12 victims recovered alive. The words hit me like a physical weight lifted from my chest. Those women were safe. If you've ever had to trust your instincts to protect someone vulnerable, you know that feeling. What's the most important lesson you've learned about recognizing dangerous people? Share your wisdom below. Your experience could save someone's life. And let me know where you're listening from. This story is reaching people all over the world. But the operation was far from over. As Danny exited the Meridian building, federal agents moved in to arrest Tom Bradley. Through my telephoto lens, I watched him realize that his easy solution to the audit problem had just become federal evidence of conspiracy to commit murder. Sarah Martinez was arrested at her home at 9:15 p.m., trying to access offshore banking systems to transfer millions in trafficking proceeds. James Wright was taken into custody at his office, in the process of shredding documents that detailed the legal framework they'd created to hide international money laundering. And at 9:23 p.m., David Blackstone was arrested in his penthouse office, while on a conference call with what FBI surveillance confirmed were trafficking coordinators in 6 different countries. The sophisticated business model that had impressed me as Margaret Chen, grateful auditor, was dismantled in less than 2 hours of coordinated federal action. By 10:30 p.m., I was sitting in a federal debriefing room, facing agents who'd monitored my entire week-long infiltration operation. Agent Chen, Harrison began, your unauthorized investigation created significant legal complications. Evidence gathered without proper federal authority may not be admissible. Agent Harrison, my evidence won't be necessary for conviction. Tom Bradley confessed on federal surveillance to conspiracy to commit murder. Sarah Martinez was caught accessing financial systems with trafficking proceeds. James Wright was arrested destroying evidence. And Blackstone was recorded coordinating with international trafficking networks. I slid my preliminary audit report across the table. Everything they need for financial crimes prosecution is documented here. Systematic money laundering, fraudulent business operations, and international banking violations, all gathered while operating under legitimate corporate audit authority. The silence in the room was telling. They hadn't expected Margaret Chen, desperate job seeker, to deliver a complete federal case with multiple prosecution angles and evidence that would hold up in international courts. And the nephew? Harrison asked. Danny cooperated fully with federal agents and provided crucial intelligence on their recruitment and threatening methods. He'll need witness protection until we can dismantle their broader network. But his cooperation saved 12 lives and exposed international trafficking operations in 6 countries. At 11:45 p.m., I walked out of the federal building where I'd spent 5 years consulting on financial crimes cases. But this time, instead of reviewing case files from previous investigations, I'd just completed an operation that would shut down trafficking networks across 2 continents. The next morning, local news reported the arrest of 4 executives at Meridian Technologies on federal charges, including human trafficking, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and operating a criminal enterprise. The 12 women recovered from the warehouse were being cared for by victim services specialists and would be key witnesses in prosecutions that could result in life sentences. But the story that didn't make the news was simpler. Margaret Chen, corporate auditor, had completed the most important audit of her career. She'd found every irregularity, documented every discrepancy, and delivered a final report that would ensure the people responsible faced consequences for their crimes. David Blackstone had been right about one thing. I was exactly what their company needed. just not in the way they'd expected. The sophisticated criminals who thought they'd hired a harmless old woman to provide audit cover had actually invited a federal agent into the heart of their operation and given her complete access to the evidence that would destroy them. Their perfect plan had become perfect justice. 6 months after the Meridian Technologies takedown, I stood in a congressional hearing room, raising my right hand to swear an oath that would help reshape how federal agencies investigate corporate-fronted trafficking operations. Agent Chen, the committee chair began, your unauthorized investigation resulted in the rescue of 12 trafficking victims and the arrest of an international criminal network, but it also raised questions about proper federal protocols. Can you explain why you chose to operate outside official channels? The answer was simple, though the implications were complex. Senator, when you have visual confirmation of victims in immediate danger, and official channels would require weeks of warrant applications and task force coordination, you have a choice. You can follow procedures and hope those victims survive the process, or you can act to save lives and accept the legal consequences. The hearing had been inevitable. My infiltration of Meridian Technologies had exposed not just a trafficking network, but systemic problems with how federal agencies responded to time-sensitive rescue operations. The 12 women I'd found in that basement had become the center of a debate about balancing legal procedures with immediate victim protection. The defendants in this case have challenged the admissibility of evidence gathered during your week-long audit. How do you respond to claims that your investigation violated corporate privacy rights? I opened the folder containing my official audit report. I was hired as a legitimate corporate auditor and given complete access to company financial records. Every piece of evidence I gathered was obtained through standard accounting review procedures. The fact that those procedures revealed systematic money laundering and trafficking operations doesn't invalidate the audit methodology. What I didn't mention in that formal hearing was the personal cost of the investigation. The relationship with my family would never fully recover from Danny's betrayal, even though he'd ultimately chosen to help save those women. Trust, once broken by gambling debts and criminal manipulation, doesn't rebuild easily. But the 12 women who'd been rescued had built new lives with federal victim services support. 3 of them had testified in the congressional hearings, describing the basement facility where they'd been held and the corporate environment that had hidden their captivity. Their courage in speaking publicly had been the deciding factor in new legislation requiring enhanced oversight of businesses with unusual security configurations and restricted facility access. After the hearing, I walked through downtown Washington, past the building where I'd spent 25 years investigating financial crimes. The FBI had offered me a position heading a new corporate infiltration unit designed to identify legitimate businesses being used as fronts for criminal operations. It was important work, necessary work, but it would mean giving up the consulting practice that had accidentally led me to those women. My phone buzzed with a message from Agent Harrison. Chen, the Meridian case just produced intelligence on 6 more trafficking operations using similar corporate cover structures. The new unit could save hundreds of victims if you're willing to lead it. Hundreds of victims. Women like the 12 I'd found in that basement, being held in corporate facilities that appeared legitimate from the outside. The decision was easier than I'd expected. That evening, I called Danny from my hotel room. We'd been in regular contact since his entry into witness protection, but the conversations were still careful, formal, nothing like the easy family relationship we'd once shared. Aunt Maggie, I saw the news coverage of your hearing. You looked professional, confident. I felt like I was doing what I was trained to do, I replied. How are you handling the relocation? Better than I expected. The counseling helps, and the federal marshals found me legitimate work in construction. It's honest labor, which feels important after everything that happened. Danny's voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before his involvement with Meridian Technologies. The gambling addiction was under control through therapy and federal supervision, but the knowledge of what his debts had nearly facilitated would stay with him forever. Danny, I want you to know something. What you did in that final meeting with Bradley, choosing to help save those women instead of protecting yourself, that took courage I'm not sure I would have had in your position. The silence on the other end stretched for a moment. I destroyed our family, Aunt Maggie. I gave criminals information they used to try to kill you. And then you risked your life to gather evidence that saved 12 innocent people and brought down an international trafficking network. We can't change what we've done, but we can choose what we do next. After I hung up, I reviewed the case files for the 6 new trafficking operations Agent Harrison had mentioned. Corporate consulting firms, technology companies, international trade businesses, all providing perfect cover for systematic human exploitation. The methodology that had worked at Meridian Technologies could be replicated. Legitimate business infiltration, systematic evidence gathering, victim location and rescue, network dismantling through financial crimes prosecution. But it would require agents willing to operate in legal gray areas, to make judgment calls about immediate intervention versus procedural compliance. 3 weeks later, I walked into my new office at FBI headquarters, where a team of 12 agents waited to be trained in corporate infiltration techniques. They'd been selected from financial crimes, human trafficking, and undercover operations divisions. All had volunteered for assignments that would require them to balance federal authority with independent decision-making. Agent Chen, the first trainee, introduced herself. I'm Sarah Kim, Financial Crimes Specialist. I want to understand how you knew to look for basement holding facilities during a routine corporate audit. The question took me back to that Friday morning when Tom Bradley had dismissed my interest in building services areas too quickly. Agent Kim, when someone in authority tells you an area is too boring to investigate, that's exactly where you need to look. Criminals hide their operations in places they think legitimate investigators won't bother examining. Over the following months, the Corporate Infiltration Unit developed protocols that balanced immediate victim protection with evidence gathering that would hold up in federal prosecutions. We created legal frameworks that allowed agents to operate under corporate cover while maintaining federal authority to act on discovered crimes. The unit's first independent operation resulted in the rescue of 37 trafficking victims from a network of import-export businesses across 5 states. The second operation exposed a construction company that was using undocumented workers as forced labor and holding their children as insurance against escape attempts. By the end of our first year, we'd rescued over 200 victims and dismantled trafficking networks that had been operating under corporate cover for decades. But the case that defined our approach came when Agent Kim, working undercover as a quality control specialist, discovered a food processing company that was using trafficked labor and selling products to major grocery chains. Instead of waiting for federal task force coordination, she initiated immediate extraction protocols and documented the corporate infrastructure that had made the exploitation possible. The resulting prosecutions led to the conviction of 12 executives and the recovery of 43 victims. More importantly, it established legal precedent for agents operating under corporate cover to take immediate action when victims were in danger. Standing in my office 5 years after the Meridian investigation, I looked at a wall covered with photographs, not of criminals we'd arrested, but of survivors we'd rescued. Women who'd been held in corporate basements, workers who'd been trapped by debt bondage, children who'd been used as leverage against their parents. Each photograph represented someone who was now living freely because federal agents had been willing to act quickly when procedures would have taken too long. My phone rang with a call from the field. Agent Chen, this is Agent Rodriguez. I'm conducting a financial audit at a pharmaceutical company, and I've found holding facilities in their research wing, requesting immediate extraction authorization. Authorization granted, I replied without hesitation. Activate rescue protocols and document everything. We'll handle the legal justifications later. That's what the Margaret Chen investigation had ultimately taught the federal system. Sometimes saving lives requires acting first and explaining the methodology afterward. The 12 women I'd found in that basement, had become the foundation for a program that prioritized victim rescue over bureaucratic procedures. The sophisticated criminals who'd thought they could hide behind corporate legitimacy had inadvertently created the very evidence we needed to hunt down others like them. Their perfect cover had become our perfect infiltration strategy. And somewhere in witness protection, Danny was building an honest life while knowing that his choice to help save those women had made all the subsequent rescues possible. Justice hadn't just been served in the Meridian case. It had been systematized, replicated, and turned into a weapon against everyone who thought corporate respectability could hide systematic human exploitation. The woman they'd hired to audit their books had ended up auditing their entire criminal enterprise, and in the process, she'd created a legacy that would protect people she'd never meet from criminals she'd never personally encounter. Margaret Chen, corporate auditor, had completed her audit. The findings were definitive. Some businesses fail the most basic test of human decency, and when they do, the consequences should be swift, systematic, and permanent. The books were closed on Meridian Technologies, but the investigation into corporate-fronted trafficking was just beginning. Your inner wisdom and professional experience matter more than you think. What warning signs have you learned to recognize? Share your story below. We're all stronger when we learn from each other's experiences.